But after being beaten up in the press and vilified in every way possible, I was up for re-election. Of course, the prediction was that Lonegan doesn't have a chance. On election day, big billboard up, support your local FOP, lots of signs around towns on front lawns of people. Outnumbered my sounds 2-to-1. We support the Bogota police, teachers, everybody else. Well, I was re-elected on that day by 63% of the vote, double-digit margins. Certainly deflated those of them out there, those special interests who thought they had total support of the community. The voters had something to say about that. And that gave me the understanding in the, remember, Bogota's a 2-to-1 Democrat town. Right. So I was reelected by double-digit margins, which sort of gave me a mandate. Of course, going forward from that point on, negotiations became a little easier, people became more cooperative, and I had a mandate to continue to govern in the way I did, which would lead to a second re-election 4 years later, again by even a larger margin than the second time I was elected. But I was very, very concerned about what would happen in my town after I was gone from office, because I had committed to term limits. I'm an avid believer in term limits. I think people spend too much time in government, and that's a big problem, because then it becomes about their own self-interests. So I introduced and passed an ordinance in 2000 called the Taxpayer Protection Act. The Taxpayer Protection Ordinance went on the ballot, was made law in Bogota, and it says simply this, that three things: that the town cannot pass a budget that exceeds the rate of inflation in the prior year, and if they want to pass a budget that exceeds the rate of inflation, it has to go on the ballot. Let the voters decide. New Jersey presently has a 4% cap, but then they have all these things about what's inside the cap. If certain things are outside the cap, that doesn't apply. So New Jersey's state government cap is a farce. So I passed very simple, inflation period, and if there's a problem, the voters will vote on it. Second part of the ordinance said that the town cannot bond any money above its current debt without putting it before the voters. And that's something I think we should be doing in every town in the state anyway. The third issue was the town cannot award a contract to any bargaining unit, police, teachers, which has an increase in the contract that exceeds the rate of inflation without putting that before the voters. So in other words, when I sat down across the street, the table from the unions, and inflation was 1.5%, and they came back and said, Mayor, we want 4%, 5%. I said, gentlemen, ladies, I appreciate that very much. We love you all, and I'm sure the voters will support you, so we'll put it on the ballot. Well, in every single contract that I negotiated after the passage of this ordinance, we never had an increase in excess of the rate of inflation. No one ever chose to put their contract on the ballot, which tells you something. The Taxpayer Protection Ordinance, which I passed, got me the Americans for Taxpayer 2000 Hero of the Taxpayer Award nationally, and was a model for ordinances passed in cities and towns around the country. Unfortunately, not in the state of New Jersey, not anywhere else. However, when I left office at the end of 2007, Bogota's budget effectively was less than it was 12 years later than I came into office. So I'm proud of that. Another issue that I faced as a mayor, and this goes to the value of local government, is that, as I told you, Governor Whitman said, we're going to reward efficiency and penalize inefficiency. I cut my town's budget the first year, the second year. My reward was to have the entire $750,000 in state aid that Bogota received eliminated over the first 3 years in office. By the time I ran for my first re-election, I received absolutely no state aid. The reward from the state government for efficiency was to be penalized, while the state continues to subsidize inefficient, ineffective local governments. And that's a model that has been consistent ever since. Very, very unfortunate. I confronted a number of major statewide policy issues, and although I was a mayor of a small town, I felt I could make a difference in those areas anyway. And I write about in my book the practice of borrowing without voter approval. When I went into office in 1996, the state's debt was $5 billion. And then something started to happen. Then a new process started to take place. See, we have a state constitution. The state constitution has a debt limitation clause. The clause says that the state cannot borrow money without a vote of the public, to put it simply. But what the state did is the state started setting up all these independent authorities and claiming they weren't really the state. And in 1999, they decided to borrow $8.7 billion for school construction. Now, up until that point in New Jersey history, every town had always built their own schools. The state never built schools before. Suddenly, big government wanted to move into building schools and borrow what would be the largest bond issue by any state in American history, without approval of the voters, under the concept that, well, we really need these schools, and therefore voters shouldn't approve it because they might vote it down. That was the sort of message. I filed a lawsuit against then Governor Christie Whitman and the New Jersey state government to block the borrowing, to block them from borrowing without voter approval. I'm not for or against the school construction bonds or its merits. That should be debated in the public. And that court, that decision, that case called the Lonegan versus New Jersey case went all the way to the state Supreme Court. And it was decided in a very, very narrow decision. It took until 2002. And we felt we were going to win this decision. It was a critical one. Losing it would destroy the state's constitutional clause. And we went into court. We had quite a good case, quite a compelling case. And one of the judges, Judge Gary Stein, was clearly on our side in his questioning and whatnot. So we argued the case in front of the state Supreme Court in January of, I think it was 2002. That's how long it took. We had stopped the issuings of these bonds in the meantime. And my attorney argued the case. But the state Supreme Court justice delayed argument, discussion on the case, interestingly enough, until Judge Gary Stein retired in September of that year. Well, a couple of months later, new Governor Jim McGreevey appointed a new judge named Barry Alpins. We then went back into court for oral argument on this critical case, and the justices decided 4-3, with Judge Barry Alpins being the deciding judge, that basically the people of New Jersey no longer had the right to vote on new debt, eliminating the debt limitation clause from the state's constitution and opening up, as I predicted then, the floodgates to unlimited borrowing. The state's debt in 1995 was $5 billion. By the year I went to court, it had exceeded $10 billion. Today, New Jersey's state debt, because the right of us to vote on new debt without voter approval, now exceeds $40 billion. So since the year 2002 to present, the state's debt has increased 300%. With the elimination of the debt limitation clause of the Constitution, with that failed decision by a narrow single one vote, we have now incurred this massive debt and have succeeded in mortgaging our children's future for the purpose of buying political votes today. $40 billion is an outrageous amount of money. And in today's current atmosphere, with the right variables converging, it is very possible that the state of New Jersey will default on this debt in the next couple of years. I think it's very, very possible. I predicted this the day I lost the court case, and it's certainly come true. But it demonstrates the importance of maintaining those constitutional rights. Remember, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we the people govern ourselves, not government. New Jersey, by the way, now has the second highest per capita debt in the nation. We've had the fastest growing debt in America now for a decade. So it's important that we establish that. That was my public policy initiative that gained me the wrath of the Republican Party when they said, how dare you file a lawsuit against Republicans? They said I was persona non grata in the Republican Party. So now maybe we'll take control of it and take it in the right direction.